Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder what health actually means to you, beyond just not being sick? Well, this new study dives deep into that very question. We all talk about health and being unhealthy, but what does it really mean in our heads? Scientists have different ideas, but what do everyday people think? This research asks a fascinating question: how do ordinary people mentally organize the idea of being unhealthy? Is it all about diseases, or is it more about how we live our lives, or if we can even do the things we want to do? You see, doctors and scientists often define health in specific ways, like the absence of disease or the presence of well-being. But what about the rest of us? Studies have shown that people think about health in lots of different ways, not just one. They might think about not having diseases, or having a healthy lifestyle, or being able to function well in daily life. The big question here is how these different ideas fit together in our minds when we think about being unhealthy. Do we lump it all together, or do some ideas matter more than others? So how did they figure this out? They used a cool method called conceptual scaling. Imagine trying to map out a neighborhood. Instead of just listing streets, you are trying to understand how different landmarks relate to each other. That is kind of what they did with words. They gave people sets of 3 words and asked them to pick which 2 were most alike, or which one was more similar to a third word. Specifically, they used the word unhealthy as the central piece. Then they had other words that represented 3 main ideas about health: one group for disease like ill or sick, another for lifestyle like unfit or overweight, and a third for functional ability like injured or impaired. By asking people to compare unhealthy to these pairs of related words over and over, they could build a kind of mental map for each person. This map shows where unhealthy sits in relation to these different clusters of ideas. Think of it like this: each time they asked a question like, is unhealthy more like ill or more like unfit? Or is ill more similar to unhealthy than overweight? These judgments help them figure out the connections people make in their minds. After they built these mental maps, they did another task to see if these maps actually predicted how people would think about health in a real-life scenario. They presented a story about someone named Erica. Erica hadn't been sick with diseases or injuries, but she hadn't exercised, slept well, ate poorly, and smoked a lot. Then they asked participants, during the last 6 months, Erica was unhealthy. They wanted to see if the mental map they created earlier would predict whether someone would say Erica was unhealthy or not. They gathered data from over 100 people, and after carefully cleaning the data to make sure it was reliable, they had a solid group to analyze. What they found was pretty fascinating. First, their mental maps were really good at showing how people actually made their judgments. They reported that their 2D conceptual maps accurately captured a substantial amount of each participant's similarity structure with a high accuracy rate. This means the way they mapped out people's thoughts was a good reflection of what people really thought. Now, for the big reveal, when they looked at where unhealthy landed on these mental maps, they found a clear winner. Most people's mental maps put unhealthy closest to the lifestyle cluster of words. So when thinking about being unhealthy, people most often linked it to things like unfit and overweight, rather than directly to ill or sick for disease, or injured, or impaired for functional ability. This was a significant finding, with about 63% of participants aligning unhealthy most strongly with lifestyle. But it wasn't just one way of thinking for everyone. While lifestyle was the most common anchor, the researchers also found a lot of pluralism. This means many people didn't just stick to one idea. Some people had a really strong, almost monistic view where unhealthy was almost entirely linked to one aspect, but many others had a more balanced view where unhealthy was connected to both lifestyle and disease ideas. Interestingly, the functional ability aspect, like being injured, played a much smaller role in how most people thought about being unhealthy. It seems that for many, even if they aren't sick with a disease, if they live an unhealthy lifestyle, they consider themselves unhealthy. And here is the kicker. Did these mental maps actually predict how people would answer the question about Erica? The answer is yes. Even though Erica had no diseases or injuries, a large majority of participants said she was unhealthy. This aligns with the study's finding that most people's maps place unhealthy closest to lifestyle. The researchers were able to predict people's answers above chance just by looking at their mental maps. This means the way we organize our thoughts about health really does influence how we make judgments about it. What's even more interesting is that people who felt more strongly about their judgment of Erica's health status were easier to predict. If someone was very sure Erica was unhealthy or healthy, Their mental map was a better predictor of that certainty. This suggests that the stronger our beliefs about health, the more consistently we apply them. So, what does all this mean? The study confirms that health is definitely multidimensional for most people, but it is not an equal mix of all the factors. Lifestyle is the big one when it comes to thinking about being unwell. This isn't just a neutral reflection of what doctors say. Our everyday understanding of unhealthy is heavily weighted towards lifestyle choices. This is important because it suggests that communicating about health might need to focus more on behaviors and habits, as that is how people are already thinking about it. If doctors are primarily focused on disease, and we're primarily focused on lifestyle, there is a potential disconnect in how we understand health information. Now, like any study, this one has some limits. For example, the words they use for functional ability, like injured, really focused on acute harm. They think a broader set of words, including mental and social functioning, might have shown different results. Also, they focused on the word unhealthy. They mentioned that healthy or not healthy might be thought about differently. And the study was done with English speakers. So people in different cultures or who speak different languages might have different mental maps of health. In the end, this research gives us a really cool snapshot of how our minds work when we think about health. It shows that our concepts are pluralistic, meaning we use multiple ideas, but they are also asymmetrical, with lifestyle choices really dominating how we perceive being unhealthy. And crucially, the way we organize these concepts in our minds actually guides how we make judgments in real-world situations. This has big implications for philosophers. It challenges ideas that health is just about the absence of disease. For psychologists, it helps us understand how these concepts shape our behavior. And for all of us, it highlights potential communication gaps between health professionals and the public. Understanding that most people anchor unhealthy in lifestyle could be key to better health advice and education. Future research could explore these health concepts in different languages and cultures and use a wider range of words to describe health to see if these patterns hold. It is a fascinating look into our own minds and how we define what it means to be well. So what do you think? Does this study ring true for you? How do you mentally map out the idea of being unhealthy? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the science of our minds, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more, and tap that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.